Hello, how are we doing? This morning I went and had a lovely cup of coffee on our Felixstowe seafront, and what was very interesting talking to the provider was the fact that the blue flag issue within our resort hasn't actually gone away. And what was being said was, we're right at the bottom end of a peninsula, as this map sort of tends to show. We're bounded by a river, top and bottom. So you're either going to know why you're coming here or you're not coming at all. And one thing he said, particularly with regards to families with young children, everybody is much more health-minded. So what a number of people do, and we're continually told that the internet is the future, the hope and the well-being of the world, not that I'm a subscriber to that view, that we need more folk and bigger footfall into our town. But the problem is we don't have a blue flag flying. And what is interesting is that across the water at Dovercourt, they do have their blue flag flying, and they do actually attract bodies into their resort. So this poor struggling amusement provider within our town was sort of questioning just what is the strategic thinking going forward to do what this sort of says: fly us to prosperity, Felixstowe, great days by the sea, come to the canopy, gal in the garden, shout aloud about fabulous Felixstowe. What seems very odd is when you had a ready-made international tailoring marketing organisation already, and you'd qualified for it, you actually voluntarily gave it up. Some of you may be aware that Southwold unfortunately has lost its blue flag accreditation this year, and they will be straining every sinew to get it back for next, because it is that important. Anyway, on to exciting and other things. And perhaps I'll just go to a shot whilst Mike takes you across towards where Comfort House is. Some of you may have been aware that some years ago there was an arrangement, or a hoped for arrangement, between our Blind Association and the affordable housing provider, Housing Association Flagship, to convert Comfort House, which is up in Walton, at the end of Exeter Road, into a 32 very fragile unit, which the Blind Association would have had a number of units of, and it would be joint funded, etc. Anyway, unfortunately, because of Flagship's inability to raise the funding, that whole scheme fell away. And if you're a regular watcher of Tabs, you will have seen the first programme we did was based at Comfort House. We went and visited it, told you about it, what it was to do. Anyway, there's been some movement on this particular issue. The Town Council took an interest and questioned Flagship, what are they doing? And here's, fresh off the press for you, is the response by Flagship, the Housing Association, is they will demolish Comfort House and the bungalows adjacent to it. So it will join probably a very long line of vacant sites that we have in our town, such as the Cavendish, the Herman de Stern, Beach Station Road, Convalescent Hill, all sites that lots of promises were made for. Following supposed demolition granted, we have a vacant site, like a lot of empty teeth in a welcoming mouth. And I find it particularly concerning that recently it has been stated that the number of affordable housing units countrywide that have been removed or sold or adapted is something like 460,000 units. The number of starts this last year, I understand, was somewhere in the region of 429. 429. Weep, wail, and really question how this nation has got its housing in such a mess. Now, what we've also done is we had a look at the Academy site, which is up in West Walton, and they've now broken through the road there and starting to put in the access to what will be the Academy's new build, as in when that gets off the ground. But perhaps you're not aware that there are a number of residents in our town who really feel that, and again, this is a peninsular issue, we are pretty isolated here, and what they were very concerned about, it was lack of choice for secondary schooling on the peninsula. So they've got themselves together and done an awful lot of work. And what follows is the interview with one of the prime movers, Mrs. Tink, in very good form. So have a look at this. Hi, this is a special insert that we're going to put into tabs. So in that we can splice it, change it, review it. It doesn't really matter, Mike, too much, does it, where we decide to start from. So what we have is an ongoing review of all the tabs issues that kicked off in January. And what is amazing for a town of this size is the number of issues that continue to move. Some have been resolved, some have got worse. If I can just give you a today's update, probably as a result of some of the things that we said when we went to Comfort House and looked at that complex of 40 odd dwellings, flagship response, it would appear, is actually to bring in the bulldozers and demolish the whole central core of the community which the sheltered housing complex was. We'll no doubt come back to this. One thing that we did discuss back in January was the new academy that is going to take over and be the sole provider of secondary education in our community. That's if a group who have grave concerns about a single choice and a very structured sort of McDonald's form of delivering secondary education is the only provider in our town. I think that there is, as I found when I made my choice for our child's education, we looked around and we didn't really find a choice that suited, so we had to move out of the district altogether. Let us introduce you to one of the members of the group who's delivering the choice, hopefully, into the future. So there we go. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Would you like to tell us, or the viewer, and there's only one at this time of day, the makeup of the group that you have?
Yeah.
Who's yourself?
There's myself and my husband, Andrew.
Right.
And we have 4 other members who are either parents or community-minded people. Who basically we've been involved in education as parents or as governors of schools in the town during the last sort of 16, 17 years.
Right.
And basically we've come together, roughly speaking, at the same time as education has gone in a slightly different direction, shall we say, particularly in our town.
Yes.
Whereby the local authority has pulled out of secondary education in our town, and we now have an education provider, a separate charitable educational trust running the school in our town. The local authority is no longer involved.
So the folk that currently are proposing to take over the provision of our secondary education are an Essex-based company.
That's right, yes, they are. They have taken over. They now run the academy.
So that they replaced the educational trust that we had running.
That's
for
right, who were run in conjunction with the local authority.
And if I remember correctly, our sort of last head that we had, who was running it on behalf of the authority, was Rob Corley, is that
That's
right?
right, yeah.
Who I thought was a very gifted head and leader, and I must admit I was very surprised that he wasn't particularly persuaded, perhaps, by the offer, in that he's gone somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that was his decision to make. I mean, basically, when we came to the decision we came to about what we were going to do,
yes,
it coincided with not only the local authority pulling out, but also the government offering groups like ours the opportunity to try and set up a school. And as we understand it, obviously the Deben High School site will be vacated when the new school is built on the Orwell site.
Right. Do we have any time frame for when that may happen?
We are only in consultation with the County Council,
right.
And our proposal, which we've submitted to the Department for Education, says that we would like to set up a school in September 2013.
Oh, quite
our
soon.
bid is not related to a school building, so
no. If there was something
the submission
that was
is separate. So, so it was a number of things that came together, and parents and community-minded people, we all came together at the same time, and we were just thinking this could be a really exciting opportunity for Felixstowe.
Indeed.
All of us who have children, there are 5 of us who have children being educated in the town, and they are all happily educated at the academy.
Right.
But we have felt in consultation with parents, and we've done a lot of community liaison and talked to parents face to face on a one-to-one basis, that as we understand it, choice is a big issue in our town.
Indeed.
We are quite geographically isolated. If people don't like the provision that's on offer, they will either suffer in silence, not being able to afford, for instance, the bus fares to send their children out to Ipswich or Woodbridge, or they send their children out to Ipswich and Woodbridge, with the consequent removal of a really exciting part of our population.
Do we have any feel of how many pupils we actually have looking to already leaving to
I would like to comment.
Education?
We have anecdotal evidence.
But the county should be able to tell us.
The figures are there.
If the station actually asked the county, it's a question we could genuinely ask. But
it is only anecdotal.
Yes.
But we are out there in the community. I'm talking about friends of mine.
Oh, yes.
I'm talking about parents, neighbours, children who are now like 4, 5, 6 who I care about, and whose families we want to keep in our town.
Absolutely.
And if we can offer them a choice, then hopefully at least they get 2 options before they decide what they're going to do.
OK, one would assume there are a number of hoops.
Yes.
And fences to be jumped or crawled under or gone around.
This has been a very scary process, and it should be, because it's education.
Well, it is, and as we keep saying, you only get one opportunity at that.
Yes.
Most of us, of my generation, in the geographical area that I grew up, I think got educated often despite the system rather than because of it. I mean, I can only thank... I can only thank Radio 4 and BBC World Service for the eclectic mix of rubbish that rattles around in my brain.
I still thank Radio 4, actually.
Yes, I mean, it does pick up a lot of the pieces, doesn't it? Now, what stage have you gone through?
Right.
Where
have you got to? Well, basically, we had an initial little chat on a pavement in the High Street in Felixstowe, and that was the gathering together of the 6 of us.
Excellent.
We then moved to our sitting room, which is HQ.
Right.
And from there we had to go, this is a serious business. We are just parents and community-minded people. We do not expect that we are not going to run this school. No. We are the catalyst for the running of the school.
Right.
But obviously the first thing we had to do was to look at how the government proposed for groups like ours to attempt to make a bid to set up a school.
Right.
And a very helpful website, the Department for Education's website itself is very helpful. They also have a charity, the New Schools Network, which they support to give us advice on how to proceed. New Schools Network have been marvellous and have helped us all the way through. So we are not going through this unguided.
Oh no, well it's a big issue.
It is a huge issue. And basically what we had to do, the first thing we personally felt we had to do was to liaise with our community. There was no point in us putting in all the time and effort and our own money, I hasten to add. This has been costly in so many ways to us, without knowing whether the community was really interested. We felt they were, just anecdotally from sitting around having coffee, but we needed firmer support. And the Department for Education required us
Well, you've got to evidence it, haven't you?
We have to evidence. They were very precise in the sort of evidence that we had to produce.
Right.
And we had to ask specifically parents of children of the age that we wish to have in our school from September 2013 to precisely tell us that they would put our school down as the first choice.
Really?
Now, that is a very difficult thing to ask a parent when the school itself does not exist yet.
Absolutely.
I'm a parent.
Yes.
I know. We know what we're dealing with, but we have to talk to parents and ask them to make this important decision. Now, this does not sign their child away, to coming to our school, but it is the evidence the government require. So we had to draw up a petition with very precise wording, and we had to get parents to sign that petition with that very precise wording.
So that is a massive vote of confidence.
It is. I mean, it is. And not only did we have to ask parents, we had to ask the rest of the community. Particularly for us, we are very keen on this school being based within the community. We want to use community resources to enable the school to be even, to thrive even more. Well, so we had to liaise with the community. We had to talk to everybody.
Yes.
Basically,
you had a meeting at
we had a public meeting at St Andrew's Church Hall,
which from memory was very well attended.
It was well attended, and we got a lot
can I just compare and contrast the difference between that meeting and the meeting that I attended as the decision towards where we were going to go was made? In that, sadly, there were Mainly it was staff, interested parties,
yes, Mike, I was there, but there were not a huge number of parents.
So, and I don't think, and this is often the case, that certainly young parents were aware of what was actually being done in their name, and this is one of our problems.
Parental engagement is a tricky thing.
Very difficult.
Parents are very busy people.
Yes,
on the other hand, I'm also aware from talking to parents that their children's education is of major concern.
Absolutely.
And we also feel that not only is it of concern that the children should be well educated, we want the community to enjoy the education that we can offer to everybody. We want the school to be a resource for everybody.
Yes.
So we needed to engage to show them that what we want to do is a really exciting thing that everybody can get involved with. Well, but I do think from the previous consultations that had been had that there was obviously a problem with engaging with parents.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lay blame anywhere,
no.
But because that's, what's the point in that? But I do feel that it's really important that we engage with parents as best we can.
And we must. But
yes.
I mean, fundamentally, I don't know whether you could see this, but this was the actual minutes of a meeting which made the decision on how secondary schooling would go forward within Felixstowe. And when I looked at the marking and the grading between the two bids, they were virtually identical. And what was worrying to me was that the community engagement that obviously one of them had was scored as low as it was, because it strikes me that if you're going to have a successful educational system, particularly going into the age we're now going into, education just doesn't stop at the school gate of primary, secondary or university. It's a whole life process, and if we're going to prepare and support our community in getting jobs, keeping businesses, looking after residents that we have, you actually do need some backup of education to be available. And one thing I've noted of late is that when we first came here, the availability of night school and the subjects that were offered was actually perhaps the best it ever may have been, because latterly it's underprovided.
That is another issue,
and it's an engagement that we need to be having, don't we? Particularly being here isolated. And I don't know whether you've heard of this term, but there's a wonderful term that the planners use: 180-degree community.
Right.
We're not actually that, because we're a little peninsula, aren't
yes.
we? But what they're saying is you've got no backland.
No.
The backland to us would be Rotterdam in Belgium, wouldn't it? They'd need to come and support us. Whereas if you're in the centre of a community, you've got 360 catchment area.
Yes.
So the numbers will always defeat us.
Yes.
So we need really to fight stronger and much more than we do.
That's what I believe. And I believe that the free school issue can address for Felixstowe specifically so many other issues. I mean, we've come across talking to people in the community. There are parents out there who hated school.
Oh, terrified.
And they have. I don't mean that, but that consequently they feel that school is not for them to get involved with. The six of us who started this, we are parents who were encouraged, certainly latterly, in our with the secondary education, to come into the school in a way that we had been welcomed in the primary market, and we were now being welcomed in the secondary market as well.
Absolutely.
And that's how most of us met.
Got motivated.
And it's a really exciting thing for parents to get involved. We're not getting in the way. We're not saying, we felt part of the team that were trying to succeed with education in Felixstowe, and that is one of the things, one of the sparks that has started us off with our idea for our school.
So the next step that
so going back to the steps. So basically, we then, after the public meeting we had in November, we then had these petitions that we needed to get out there in the community. They were circulated in playgrounds. The library were kind enough to help us, various shops in the town, because we needed signatures and we needed ages of children. And we also had a community form because we needed the community. We needed anyone to tell us that they liked the idea of our school. And once we had collated that, we had to make a very serious submission to the Department for Education by February. Now, this involved, in our case, it was a very lengthy document with various sections to do with our educational vision, our financial plan, our actual vision of our liaison with the community. It's very lengthy, it was very detailed, and we had to get help from educational advisors who know us, understood Felixstowe itself. They've been involved with Felixstowe as a community and educationally for several years, and they helped us hugely to write the bid and basically turned our vision into something acceptable for the Department for Education. So that hefty tome was sent off in late February to the Department for Education.
Right.
And then we then had a nerve-wracking couple of months where we had to wait and hear whether we would get an interview or not. That was the next stage in the process.
Right.
There were I gather, about 300 or 400 submissions are rejected before interview. So we did very well when we had the great news that we had been accepted for an interview.
Excellent.
And so we then had to continue engaging with the community, and we had a really exciting meeting in the library the week before we went to London to see the Department for Education, which was basically an open house where anybody from the high street or anywhere could come and walk in and talk to us one-to-one about test us and check out our vision, and and we had lots of people, which was wonderful. A lot of parents. It was great to talk with parents who have got young children and they want to stay in Felixstowe and they want their children to be educated in Felixstowe. And we were able to talk to them one-to-one. That was really helpful. That fired us up. The four of us who then had to go to the Department for Education, I went with these, with these voices ringing in my ear, and I knew that we were doing the right thing.
Like an Olympic start cut.
It was a bit like that.
Yeah. So who did you meet at the education department?
We met, there was a panel of people who each had a specialism in a particular area of our school.
Right.
So there was a chairperson, and then there was somebody who was a specialist in the educational vision, and a community liaison person, and somebody from the financial.
So these are all civil servants?
These are all civil servants
from the Department
for Education,
and
talking to the four of us.
Right.
They were lovely but inscrutable. They were not going to give us any feedback at the time. But they gave us a real opportunity. We came away from there and we really felt we had told them they really wanted to know about our town. They wanted to know,
that's key, isn't
which
it?
was fantastic. So
yes.
I then overtalked them far too long about, and we all just contributed what we had to say about, and it was serious stuff, and as it should be.
So that was
That was at the end of May.
Right. So what are you sitting and waiting on?
We're sitting and waiting for them to either say, yes, you have been successful to move on to the pre-opening stage, or they may say...
So they're all stages, you've got to get through each one, and one would assume the catchment reduces.
Yes, and it starts to funnel down to the nitty-gritty of the schools that will actually exist next year.
So is there any sort of, financially, is there sort of a sum of money per head of students that you can work with?
Students are funded per head. We actually, if we go into the pre-opening stage, will be given funding by the Department for Education to go into the pre-opening stage, because let's face it, if we get this, we then need people in. We need project management. We need a head teacher. We need a business manager, and we also, we need everybody in place well before the school opens. And obviously, we are still just parents and community-minded people with no money apart from what's in our rather shallow pockets. So we have to wait for the Department for Education to give us the go-ahead.
So may I invite you back, regardless of the outcome of that, as in when you hear it. But could we just finish on a question I'd like to put to you?
Yeah.
In one job that I did, I visited literally hundreds of schools all over the UK. And schools changed and were very different. Where they were was a key determinant of how they functioned. But the ethos of the school seemed to come and depend on leadership pretty much. Yeah. Now, we talked about the previous head, and there was a nice little thing that I picked up here, and it said, and this was the bit I was going to ask you on really, what I note in some places, education is sort of a school-centric system, and they have a very tight structured system, and a bit like producing beans. It reminded me very much of my Air Force training, whereby it was a tick box, it was a vote for Joe voting system, and it was training rather than education. It wasn't teaching you to think for yourself. It wasn't keeping the curiosity alive. It was you were driven by the fact that if you didn't pass this particular next series of tests, and you'd either be backclassed or move into a different type of employment altogether.
No, I understand completely what you're saying.
I not learning by rote even. It was a sort of And I think a lot of apprenticeships, sadly, are that way as well. They're very narrow, very selective, and they're rather more for the benefit of the employer rather than the long-term benefit of the student or the trainee. So would the ethos of the school that you're looking to try to persuade various bodies to allow the town to do deliberate choice, would that be school-centric or would it be pupil-centric?
We are hoping one of our central tenets is to promote a love of learning. So what we actually want is for the pupils to come through our doors, bringing their families with them, and enjoy every minute of the time they spend in our school. Now, this does not mean that we will have a curriculum in place,
but of course
and it has to be a fairly strict curriculum. But I do not want anyone to think, therefore, that their child would be excluded from that for whatever reason, because the way that the timetable will be structured is that the subjects will be taught.
Right.
It will be up to, we'll have various learning areas, and it will be up to the heads of those learning areas to make sure that every child who is being taught that subject is being taught to the best of their ability, to the best of the child's ability.
So we will concentrate on the strength of the child.
Yes, indeed. Every child will be celebrated for themselves. Yes. We intend to have individual learning plans for each child. And indeed, we do have the rather challenging, another central tenet is that every teacher will know the name of every child in our school.
Yes.
That sounds a bit like a silly little detail, but actually
factual.
It's important.
It is. Now, final thing, and this was the Times looking at the GCSE results, and one of the top schools said, the secret of our success, we showed pupils life beyond the classroom, said leading schools. So one would assume if you're looking for it to be a proper community school, then that would be the engagement.
Absolutely.
It would be the community,
we are spending
the
10% of our timetable will be spent in engagement with the community. That's an intention, that our students will go out into the town and that the town will come into the school.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
Keep us informed.
Certainly
and
will.
Hopefully when you get the approval to go through to the next stage, which I'm sure you should.
This is a community project. I'd like to share the celebration or the commiseration, so it would be great to come back. Thank you.
Well, thank you, my love.
Yeah, thank
See you the next time.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully you found that interview of interest. I thought Mrs. Tink was great. We would hope to have her back, and if you, as a parent of children who are looking to go into secondary school in a few years' time, I'm sure that a choice will be important to you, and if you feel the outline of the school that was described by Mrs. Tink is of interest to you, then undoubtedly contact this station or the group directly. Okay, let's move on now up into West Woden, which we briefly passed on, whereby there's a cut in the hedge now and looks as if there's a road going in. I understand there may be a land issue and there may be a slight delay in the build, but don't quote me on that because we are waiting for confirmation. What I would like to do whilst we're up in West Woden is briefly have a little update on the Tesco proposal that they wish to bring in. I think it's a 30,000 foot floor space store needing to turn over 3 million a month up in West Woden. And I don't know whether many of you read the Financial Times, but this was an article that was in it this last week, and it shows that Tesco's overall market share is falling by a further 1% or so, despite a new strategy that Philip Clark, the CEO, is brought forward. And I don't know if we can get to that shows what's happened to their share price. What was very interesting, and it was something one of their competitors released, I believe yesterday or the day before, and that was Sainsbury's. And apparently they've had a growth in their sales, and I believe by about 1%. And where they say they've achieved it is internet shopping, which again, the internet will be the solution to all the world's problems, it would appear, or at least their shopping problems. But also their small stores. So it's the neighbourhood store and the internet where their growth has been. So one is wondering whether these mega stores are needed in quite the numbers that they are, that Tesco seems hell-bent on spreading all over the country when a competitor seems to be doing very, very good business using their existing infrastructure plus the internet. Now, it's obviously not for me or anybody else to tell these undoubtedly very experienced retailers what they should be doing, but our view would be that we need our retail offer to be together, to be inclusive, to actually support each other, not be disparate and spread across the whole of our peninsula, fragmenting the market but damaging component parts of it. That's a personal view. You may share it or not, and if you don't, tell us why not on Felixstowe Forum. It's available for you to make a comment on the output of this studio or raise any subject that you wish. We are, after all, a community television station, and it's for the community to determine where we go. What I would like to bring you up to date on is community health, and you may or may not be aware that the nearly the last, or coming to the last, NHS Suffolk Primary Care Trust board meeting was held at Bury St Edmunds last week, at which the confirmation of the disposal of community health, this is the divestment programme that they have been engaged in for some very long time. The whole thing should have been done and dusted before April 2011, and here we are. What are we now? June 2012, aren't we? And we're still muddling our way through. And one of the reasons may well be is that, sadly, for us and those who live in East Suffolk, the whole process of our community health has now been mightily fragmented. The health services that are under consideration for disposal is that side, and you can see quite a few there. And then that, a lot of those have gone to Suffolk County Council, and we would hope they'll make a better fest of it than what they did back in the 50s, 60s and 70s. We'll wait to see with interest, won't we? My main concern, I think, is that as things stand, the preferred bidder for our community hospitals, district nurses, etc., is an outfit called Circle, and we did discuss them, I believe, in the last tab. So if you want to know what we said, look back at that if you wish. But fundamentally, it's a private provider with very little experience in community health as such. And I'm wondering whether we're a lost leader, you know, so some company with quite deep pockets looking to get into the market to obviously expand its field and make more profit for its shareholders. I feel somewhat let down by NHS Suffolk on the basis that we're in a position here where you're moving towards a fire sale, because they themselves will be disappearing from your screens and papers in April 2013, because then your GP that you attend and whose clinics you sit and wait will have full responsibility for the whole, well, nearly the whole of the provision of your health needs. So what I would suggest you do, if you are interested, is perhaps get yourself on your GP panel and make your views known. That's assuming you have some. One quick final little bit of NDOP on this particular slot is we put in a Freedom of Information request to the Community Health Group to find out what the cost of things are. You know, we keep saying, well, I'd like a hospital bed, and you're told it's 700 or 800 a day, and it's kind of hard to get a figure on what are the actual costs and how are those costs distributed. Are they the whole cost of the operation then is just subdivided into the number of beds, or is there an allowance for other services that might be delivered out of that health facility, such as outpatients clinics, children's clinics, minor unit? It's unclear, but this was a figure we got for Felixstowe in 0708. The average cost per day per bed was £351. I'll say that again, £351. Now, what we need to know, in that there are 16 of them, aren't there, if that's their worked out cost for 16 beds for a year, it would be very interesting to know what that type of cost will be for the 3-year contract that Circle have got, and how much of the bid for that contract reflects what is a realistic price. Or are they looking to cost cut? And if they do cost cut, what will then happen? Final item is you may be aware that the bids for the Bartlett closed, I believe it was week before last. You may have seen in the local press the fact that the Bartlett Bequest Action Group, of which I am a member, have actually made a bid for it. And the bid for it, for your interest, is that we offered to them what they paid for it when they confiscated this building back in 1947. We also asked that the endowment trust, which at the time of transfer or confiscation was greater than the value of the Bartlett, that we have a proportion of that back so that we can maintain Dr. Bartlett's wish that it would be maintained in perpetuity to provide rehabilitation for patients receiving their treatment at Ipswich District Hospital. And finally, we asked that they put the building in the order that it was when it was transferred or confiscated by them in 1947, because I've just recently written or read a committee minute on the transfer itself, and it was stated that the property was in A1 condition, and that was by one of the inspecting board members. So we are looking with interest to know whether we have been successful in securing the Bartlett for future generations and existing, to ensure that the healthcare that you get is as good as it can be, and equally Ipswich District Hospital would function far more effectively if it had a professional rehabilitation unit available to discharge its patients to. Thank you for watching. Any issue that you want to raise, hit the Felixstowe forum, see what you think. Bye bye.